Welcome members and members of the public to this evening's council meeting or meetings. In accordance with the constitution of the council, there are 3 consecutive extraordinary meetings this evening, each one to consider the appointment of a section 151 officer for the council, the second meeting starting at 6:15 or at the conclusion of this meeting will consider a recommendation from the executive regarding a new build housing in Chiddingfold, and the third meeting at 6:30 or at the conclusion of the second meeting, if later, will consider a recommendation from the executive regarding 69 The High Street, Godalming. Members, please raise your hand to indicate you wish to speak, and you will be operating your own microphones. If you are unable to hear clearly, please indicate. I can also confirm that we are live streaming this meeting this evening. We will be using the electronic voting system using the consoles in front of you. And when I call for a vote, your consoles will light up and you will be able to vote. The green dot is on the left is for, to indicate for. The yellow dot in the middle, if it's there, is for abstention. And the red dot on the right is for against, to signify against. If any member calls for a recorded vote and is duly supported by 5 other members, we will do this via a roll call in the normal way. If members are happy to agree a recommendation by general assent, we will do that in the usual way. All speeches will be timed at 4 minutes. You will be given a 30-second warning before your time is up. Members may only speak once on each item, except in the circumstances as set out in Procedure Rule 14.6. And if you are making a point of order, please be clear about which procedure, rule or law you think has been breached and how, and then wait for my agreement before you may proceed. So we come to agenda item number 1, which is apologies for absence. Ben, are there any?
Thank you, Mayor. You have apologies for absence this evening from Councillors Beeman, Merriweather, Palmer, Lawton, Steiger, Sullivan and Ward.
Thank you. And declarations of interest, members, are there any? Thank you. So we come to agenda item number 3, the appointment of the section 151 officer. The Joint Appointments Committee met on the 14th of August this year to consider the appointment of a section 151 officer, also known as a chief financial officer. And the unanimous recommendation of that joint committee is that Richard Bates be appointed as the interim section 151 officer for Waverley Borough Council. Councillor Follows, as leader, would you like to move this recommendation?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, and thank you. Yes, I would of course like to move this motion, and I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And are there any speakers? Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone, Madam Mayor, members, officers and members of the public, who I'm very pleased to see are significantly less hostile tonight than I assumed they might. Well, I think so, Jenny. This item is to request the approval to council, approval of council to appoint Richard Bates as the interim section 151 officer for both Waverley and Guildford Borough Council. Obviously, your approval tonight will be the Waverley part, and Guildford will be doing theirs in turn. The recommendation to appoint to this position comes from the Joint Appointments Committee, otherwise known as the JAC. This is a committee made up of representatives from both councils and includes the leaders and deputy leaders of both of those councils, plus the leaders of the opposition of both of those councils. In this case, because the meeting was held here at Waverley by a custom we established some time ago, it was my turn to chair that meeting, and so I did. Now, in this case, the JAC recommendation was unanimous, but for the assurance of members, I wanted to go into a little of what that session involved and the sorts of questions that we asked so that you have an idea of why we have given that recommendation. As part of the process, the candidate was asked to take part in a technical evaluation. This was led by Peter Vickers and Ian Doyle, and the feedback was relayed to the committee. This was supplemented by statements from the portfolio holders for finance at both councils. So that's Councillor Merriweather here at Waverley and Councillor Richard Lucas over at Guildford Borough Council. Now, this was followed by the more traditional review of CV and questions from the committee. Candidate has significant experience in handling matters at more than one council, a key requirement of this position, as I'm sure we will agree. We also asked questions about personal resilience and workload, as well as the specific references to somewhat more urgent budgetary issues at Guildford and how that might impact the balance of workload between Guildford and Waverley Borough Councils. The answers were good and showed a clear understanding of the issues on top of the demonstrable core competencies that the role requires. The JAC passed a unanimous recommendation, as I said, and in turn, I renew my support for that recommendation tonight and commend it to Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, members. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, this is the third Section 151 officer we've had since the council made its hurried decision to merge the senior management team with Guildford just over 2 years ago. And as this is an interim appointment, I suppose it's likely we might have a fourth, which does show some staff instability. We have only a summary of the CV summary. And I appreciate that probably you can't give the answer in open session, but I was interested to know why the candidate left his permanent 151 position previously, and also where he lives, because I was amazed when we had a licensing panel meeting and we were advised by a very good lawyer, interim officer, I believe, and discovered she lived in Chester, and commuting from Chester to Godalming does seem a bit of a distance. I also note the financial implications as set out in the bottom of page 7, the financial implications, which sets out there the daily rate that is being paid, which does come to an eye-watering sum when you multiply it by the numbers of days in the week, and then assuming that with holidays, it might be some 6 weeks of holidays, that what that figure comes to. And I can't mention it because we're not in exempt. I'm also concerned that due to Guildford's financial problems, that we will not have our fair share of this officer. I know it's been mentioned by the leader, but I have my doubts. And as this was meant to, as the merger with Guildford was meant to be a saving of money, I can see this is not going the right direction, particularly if you take into account the agency costs that we no doubt will have had to pay. Now, we need to have a Section 151 officer, so I will, of course, vote for it, but it is at a cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodrich. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Yes, I would echo precisely what Councillor Goodrich has just said. I've got exactly the same things noted. My concern, of course, and I think everybody else's concern here, is how long is it going to take? It appears that the second firm have found candidates, but it's not entirely clear. It's said that it will be coming along in September. I don't think that's in breach of exempt at all, that we've got this coming back. And if that is the case, because obviously the longer that that we have the interim rates that Councillor Goodrich has touched upon, this is even splits between two councils, we'd have half the amount of time. It is still costing that amount, and as Councillor Goodrich said, we might imagine that Guildford's problems would require considerably more of the Section 151 officers' time than we might. So whatever savings we're making on collaboration, we're throwing away whilst we're having to use effectively agency staff, interims, and I wouldn't want to detract at all or suggest that he's not properly qualified. It would perhaps be useful to go into exempt, but I doubt if many other people wanted to cover the issues that Councillor Goodridge has just mentioned regarding the CV, the final page of the documents we've got in front of us. But we do have to have one. I would like to know, please, how long this is going to go on for. That's how long is a piece of string question, of course, but have we got have the second firm that we're relying on to find the long-term solution, have they found candidates for us? Is that what's coming to us in September? Or should we be worried that there is difficulty in finding them and this could go on for a long time? The other thing, just to touch on it, if we can go to the recommendation, if we may, on page 4, Madam Mayor, at section 2 or paragraph 2, their recommendation to council, we're asked to agree that Richard Bates be appointed as the interim section 1851 officer. Should that say interim joint section 151 officer? And should afterwards perhaps it say subject to Guildford Borough Council's approval, because I think that is the case, obviously, when they make the decision, but possibly not. But I think the position is for an interim joint section 151 officer, is it not? That's what the documents are describing. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the previous two speakers have raised a number of the queries and questions that we have and the number of Section 151 officers we've had since the coming together with Guildford. But the most important thing that I think they both raised is how long are we going to have the interim officer? Because I think that needs to be processed with some speed. Otherwise, the costs do become extremely eye-watering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. So, Councillor Follows, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you. I'll just try and deal with some of the questions that were raised, starting with Councillor Hyman. I think in this case, the legal position is Section 151 officer, so I believe that the recommendation would be valid as is. I think we did touch upon this at the JAC. I would just ask the Borough Solicitor to comment if I'm incorrect on that.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to say that there will have been a similar process at Guildford, designating Mr. Bates as either that's happened or will be coming, designating Mr. Bates as their tomorrow. Thank you, Chief Executive, designating Mr. Bates as their Section 151 officer. So both councils will be designating the same person to be their Chief Finance Officer and Statutory 151 officer as independent bodies.
Sorry, so you're saying he won't be a joint Section 151 officer as described in the papers here. He will just be the Section 151 officer for each of us separately, not joint.
I understand from the Chief Executive that he will be operating across both authorities, having been designated by both authorities as their respective 151 officers. So in practice, it will be joint.
If I may continue, Madam Mayor, I think the point, Councillor Hyman, is that in this case, it functionally doesn't matter. If it did, I'd put up an amendment saying so, but a Borough Solicitor has given clear indication that it's fine as it is. In terms of how long until we can appoint a permanent one, I mean, obviously, I would like that to be as soon as possible. But from my point of view, and I'm sure it's one that most of you will share, it's more important that we get the right person than any person. And obviously we'll take a view in September if the recruitment processes that we've got undergoing don't come up with anybody that would be appropriate. But I don't think at that point I'd be sitting here saying, well, it's been 6 months, let's appoint whoever rocks up. Because it's important that they are the right person and can handle and understand the job in question. We are tonight only looking at whether we're going to appoint Richard Bates as the interim Section 151 for Guildford and Waverley, of which I believe there is absolutely no barrier to us doing so. I am slightly, obviously, I can't not raise this as it's been touched on. We aren't merging with Guildford Borough Council. The number of opportunities where even a statutory appointment requires a little bit of a political intervention just to really jab it in for people who might be willing to deliberately misunderstand what we're talking about. I'm very keen that we do not give our officers cause for concern and worry people about what's going on. We do not have a plan to merge with Guildford Borough Council. We're sharing resources and we're sharing some staff to the joint benefit of both councils. Now, I am expecting the new interim officer, as well as I will be expecting the new permanent officer to be putting in 50% of their time to each councils. Now, events will dictate on some occasions that will be more in Guildford and it'll be more in Waverley on others. There will be times where that is balanced across. And if you can find me a single officer that we all work with regularly here who isn't already putting in more than 100% of their time, well, frankly, I think you need to go and spend some time working more with our officers, because you'll see the amount of effort that they're putting in. And many of them, if you enforce some kind of stock take of their time, will definitely be doing less for both councils for sure. At that point, I will commend the recommendation as is to council. Mr. Bates is eminently qualified to do the role, and I think will be an excellent interim 151. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. So we now come to voting electronically on the recommendation as you have in your papers. So Ben, would you please launch the vote, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 38 votes for and 6 members have not voted.
Thank you very much. So 38 votes for and 6. Okay. Would you like to signify by raising your hand? You're for? So that's one more, 4. So 39 for and 6 abstentions. 5 not voted. Councillor Follows.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Mayor. If somebody chooses not to vote using the system, is that automatically counted as an abstention by Democratic Services in the figures?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the assistance there. So we have 39 votes for and no votes against. Thank you. That's carried.
Yes, I think there are at least 2 members who, yeah, he's given apologies, but I think Councillor Hess and Councillor Jane Austen are not here with no apology either. So they might be counted in as not voting. However, with 39 in favour, that is carried. So thank you very much. And as there's no other business to be considered in this first meeting, this meeting is concluded. And now we have the second meeting of tonight. So agenda item number 1, apologies have already been duly noted. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members, are there any? No, thank you. Agenda item 3, the new build housing at Chiddingfold. The executive met on the 1st of August 2023 to consider this and made just one recommendation to the council as set out in your agenda. The recommendation is that an allocation of an additional £402,332, no pence, budget is from reserves be approved to enable the delivery of 26 new homes in Chiddingfold. Leader, may you move the recommendation, please?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Very pleased to move the recommendation, and I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
And with your consent, Madam Mayor, I'd like to hand over to Councillor Paul Rivers to introduce the item on behalf of Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mayor. So, members have already considered and approved the business case for the delivery of these homes. This was at a meeting of the full council on 13th of December 2022. Now, following further work in construction design, the receipt of detailed information from the utility companies, and other work to de-risk the project, additional budget is required to ensure that the contingency remains in place when we enter contract and to completion. As identified in exempt Annex 1, Section 3, headed value for money, this scheme remains financially viable. This project is consistent with our Waverley corporate strategy, one of these strategic priorities being to provide good quality housing for all income levels. And members, I refer you to the special document entitled Build More, Build Better, Build for Life, which is our affordable homes delivery strategy from 2022 to 2025, as it sets out our commitment to build homes to buy or rent for households at all income levels. So the delivery of these 26 homes at Chiddingfold, including 5 shared ownership homes, meets these priorities and commitments. Now, just as a slight piece of information for all of us to be aware of, at the end of June this year, 1,180 applicants were waiting for accommodation on the housing register. In June last year, it was 1066. So this is not time to take our foot off the gas. These numbers do fluctuate, but not a time for us to slow up. I am pleased to commend this recommendation to the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Rivers. Are there any speakers? Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Residents across Parkfield, Hartsgrove, Queensmead and Turnersmead have been incredibly patient, living amongst fenced off empty homes and dilapidated garages, with some of these residents having moved out of their homes to accommodate this redevelopment up to 2 years ago. I'd like to thank them for their patience, and I'm sure they will be as relieved as myself that we are now in a position to enter into contract with Feltham Construction after the unfortunate and unforeseen delays caused by the previous contractor going into administration. Although an increase in budget is required to ensure that there is a suitable contingency in place, the business case remains strong, and I'm pleased to see that the viability of the schemes has in fact improved from when we approved them in December last year. These homes will be a fantastic addition to the village, contributing to our local housing needs and the delivery of our neighbourhood plan. I hope that all members will support the recommendation and that the main construction work will soon be underway to deliver these much needed and very welcome, sustainable, affordable homes for Chiddingfold. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. We have Councillor Goodridge and then Councillor Atkins to speak. Councillor Goodridge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note the recommendation and will be supporting it. But looking at the wording of the recommendation, there's no mention which reserves the money is coming from. Now, I assume it's the housing revenue reserves or whatever the appropriate wording is in the housing department. I understand in theory, it's possible for general fund monies to go to housing, not the other way around. And therefore, to be totally clear as to where the money is coming from, might I suggest that we make it clear that these monies are coming from the housing revenue reserve rather than anywhere else? It just seems tidier housekeeping to ensure that happens. And if I need a formal proposal, I doubt
No,
it. But
It's agreed here. Thank you.
good.
Yeah. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to see that with this proposal that there is financial value for money achieved as the gross open market development value exceeds the total scheme cost. This is fantastic. However, it does seem from someone that's new that there is a trend for ever increasing costs. And I think this needs to be recognised, especially as we move on to the next topic. One question I do have is within the revised scheme cost total of 9.3 million, does this include the cost of the land, or is this something that Waverley have always owned?
Councillor Atkins, have you finished? Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. I was going to ask exactly the same as Councillor Atkins. I just wanted to inform other members that in case they missed their emails earlier, only the final page of this is exempt. So if they're shocked that people are talking about numbers that are on pink paper in their hard copies, it's not. It shouldn't be pink, it's white, and that's been agreed. So we can mention the names, and people can, if they wish to, talk to everything except in open, everything except for page 15 and 16. So yes, we're looking at 300 and how did I work it out? That's a provision to my calculator. £358,000, £360,000 per home. It's increased to now, plus the cost of the land. So we do have to keep an eye on this. It's going to be the trend in a lot of developments, and we're going to have to make sure that. Well, where do we draw the line? Frankly, we ought to be asking tenants and consulting with tenants and everything. I know the portfolio holder for housing is very keen to do so. We can't consult with them obviously on issues which are on exempt paper, but nevertheless, this isn't exempt, and we really do need to work out whereabouts we are going to draw the line, because things, we're going to have a number of cases where costs are increasing, and it's going to be an issue for us. We've got to draw the line somewhere. Clearly, on this one here, there's a mind in this forum that we're in tonight not to say no to this. Myself, I don't know the land value, so I don't really know what it would total. I will go along with it because I don't want to say no, stop to something which I think overall is good for us. But at what price? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Councillor Spence, and then Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too will be going along with this, because I think the underlying intention to build these houses is a very good and strong one. However, reading some of the papers here, we're here effectively because, as I understand it, the original contractor went into administration. So I was perhaps disappointed. I can't see anything in the papers that talk about surety bonding, because I would have expected that if you're in a contractor enters into a contract with us, that we should require bonding, either advance payment or performance bonding, so that we have some financial clout for very much this case, this type of case. So I would be grateful if the officers could perhaps explain whether there was surety bonding, and if not, why not? Thank you.
Would you like to comment? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, W Stern unfortunately went into administration, but we weren't actually in JCT contract with them at the time. Otherwise, we would have had those necessary assurances in place.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Follows.
I wasn't proposing to sum up. I'm assuming Councillor Rivers would do that. Just wanted to make a couple of comments on the substantive as well. Firstly, just to say thank you to Councillor Busby, and also just to say to his residents in Chiddingfold, thank you for their patience. Have been exceptionally patient with this. This is one that, with the original developer going bust, was not something that we were particularly thrilled about ourselves. Unfortunately, the pandemic did take a number of such companies out, or put extra pressures on them at a time where they could least absorb it. So I do want to say thank you to those residents who have put up with a fairly unpleasant situation near their properties for the last year or so. A trend for ever increasing costs. I mean, do I really need to go into why that is in the current economic climate? I mean, of course, I would look to the expertise that Councillor Atkins is bringing to the equation, but strangely found nothing in your register of interest to inform me as to what that might be, Councillor Atkins, but I'm sure we can take that to something else later. In terms of consulting with tenants, I think we do that a great deal, and obviously there are some issues about consulting on matters that are confidential, but we do our best to try and consult with tenants as we go. I think I'll have to rely on Councillor Busby to let me know. I'm hoping we did a reasonable job consulting with residents in Chiddingfold about what was going on. There are probably lessons that we could learn either way. And I think we're probably in a situation where there's going to be a lot of strain on these sorts of developers, and this is not a completely unforeseeable scenario in the future. So if there are lessons to be learned about comms, we should probably take them from this one. And finally, just a note on exempt papers. I'd have to, again, get confirmation from Borough Solicitor or the monitoring officer, but I think the papers could be on scarlet dark puce, or, you know, written on the wall. If it says exempt next to it, it's exempt. It's not there being pink that make them exempt. It's saying exempt on the papers that make them exempt. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you indeed, Councillor Follows. Councillor, unless there's any other speakers, Councillor Paul Rivers to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Very little to add. Thank you to my colleague here for its support from the ground. I just point out to members that there, in terms of land value, there is nothing so cheap as a sofa in somebody else's house. And with the increasing number of people applying in hope for our social housing, we need to keep on going. Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atkins, you've asked to speak again. Have you a point of order?
I just wondered if my question could be answered, Madam Mayor, please.
Thank you. And so, without any other speakers here this evening, I call on the vote on the recommendation as set out in your report. Councillor Goodridge.
With the amendment?
With the amendment, yes. Everybody followed that? It's the amendment about where the reserves are coming from. So the amended recommendation. Then would you please launch the second vote of tonight, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 39 votes for, no abstentions and none against.
Thank you very much, Ben. So that also is carried, and there's no other business in this meeting of this extraordinary council. And so I bring this meeting to a close.
Madam Mayor, before we start the next meeting, you've given me indulgence to introduce Richard Bates to you as our new Section 151 officer. Councillors, thank you.
Good evening, councillors.
So, third time lucky, or maybe not. So we have another meeting, our third meeting of this evening. Apologies for absence, I think have already been duly noted. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Follows.
You record all interest that I'm also leader of Godalming Town Council in another hat, and I'm also one of the 2 ward members for Godalming Central and Oxford, of which the site is located.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Councillor Atkins.
So I have taken advice from the head of Legal and Democratic Service and the monitoring officer, as one of my companies is the landlord of the potential tenant referred to in the papers, but in another borough. But her and I are both satisfied that there is no need for any personal disclosure of interest for this meeting. I also wondered if you would like me to talk about my register of interest, which was brought up, because I have similarly taken advice from Fiona Cameron, Kimberly Sohn regarding this, and I have emailed traffic to prove it. I've also been advised that because my business assets are outside the borough, save as for 2 in Farnham that I would have advised Kimberly of several weeks ago, that I don't need to amend my register of interests. I'd just like to say that since being a councillor, I have followed officer advice regarding my register of interests and have taken further advice from Susan Sale, who completely agrees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we come to the agenda item, which is agenda item number 3. The executive met on the 1st of August to consider this and have made 2 recommendations to the council as set out in your agenda papers. One is the approval of a budget of 230,000. This is exempt Annex 2 to be met from the Asset Investment Reserve to progress phase 1 of the revised project. This will be to deliver the commercial element of the project to RIBA stage 4, the detailed design phase, and to enable the submission of a planning application for the commercial unit. And the second is the approval of an overall capital budget of £1.96 million, including the £230,000 referred to as per the breakdown in exempt Annex Appendix 4 to cover the anticipated cost of the capital works to the commercial unit, with the delegation to executive to approve the final budget once tender returns for the construction contract have been received. Councillor Follows, would you like to move the recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to propose, and I believe have a seconder.
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, with your indulgence, I will just say a few words of introduction before I hand over to Councillor Townsend on behalf of Councillor Merriweather to do the more substantive introduction. I'm very pleased to see this subject come forward to you all tonight, as it represents a first iteration of an approach to intervention in our high streets right across the borough that will form part of the new corporate strategy in the winter and has already been part of the manifestos of almost every person in this room. I have the pleasure of being one of the 2 ward councillors for Godalming High Street alongside Councillor Keel, and Godalming High Street, like all high streets in the country, is subject to fairly harsh economic conditions, and positive in our intervention in our high street is fundamental to keep them as functional high streets. Now, sitting back and hoping that everything will either turn out fine in the current economic climate, or that the government will actually intervene in a meaningful way, i.e. a change in planning policy, a change in regulations for business rates, or a change in the governance about how properties on high streets work, nothing really will be sufficient. Speaking to almost any resident in Waverley, and I imagine most of you have done this recently and probably did during the election, you will almost always encounter an assumption that Waverley, the council, or indeed Godalming Town Council or the relevant parish, that Waverley gets to pick who goes in any of the units. They will assume that if there are 11 coffee shops on the high street, that is because somebody here in the council will have decided that that's what we need. They'll assume that when whatever empty unit is empty, it's because the council hasn't got round to finding somebody yet. They will certainly assume that all of these powers lie with the council. They will also assume that we get to set the rent. So if a tenant goes, that will be Waverley's fault. If they don't come in the first place because the rent is too high, that'll be Waverley's fault. They also assume that we set the business rates, and not only do we set the business rates, that we keep them. As I think you all in this room know by now, but many residents do not, Waverley do not set the business rates. In fact, we only keep about 5p in the pound. We don't get to set the rents unless we own the site, and we don't get to decide who goes in there unless we own the site. And even then, we are still subject to the market as to what sorts of tenants will come forward. Now, the council also then has other layers on this, including its democratic functions, what we consider value for money for residents, which is obviously different from what corporations and shareholders consider value for money. Let's remember that it's broader than just the financial. But also that we can actually then access some of these levers. I mean, if we own the building, we do get to have some say as to who goes in it. We do get to talk about whether they're a sustainable, reasonable tenant that follow some semblance of an attempt at meeting climate change obligations, that have an attempt at least at ethical and sustainable procurement within their companies. So these are things also that are non-financial benefits that I think we can access as a landlord. Now, we do get to set the rents when we're a landlord. And actually, for me, the ideal landlord in the high street is one that does the following. It's one that is financially sustainable enough that it can absorb short-term issues. It's one that is going to be around in the next 10 years in some form. And it's one whose aspect is towards sustainability and community values. It is not towards profit as its sole governing purpose. There are very few organizations outside of charities that meet those four principles, in my view, and local authorities, local councils are one of them. Now, many of us run a manifesto campaign. Part of our manifesto is about intervention in the high street, and we are therefore, I think, broadly accepting of the practice of intervention of local government into this market. I'd be very keen to have a discussion with anybody who thinks that the market in the high street is currently functioning well, because I think it is clearly not by many different metrics. So this is a project that seeks to support our high street, seeks to bring forward sustainable housing, seeks to keep it in council ownership. It meets a great many of our corporate strategy elements, and I believe would have not only the support of Godalming Town Council, which I believe it would have in spades, and I would urge those who are members also of Godalming Town Council to say something on this application this evening, but also the residents of Godalming. I mean, any of you here who are Godalming Town Councillors will know how much people care about the high street and how much they want the high street to stay ideally commercial and instead of residential. I'm over the time. My apologies, Madam Mayor. I'm going to now hand it to Liz to deal with some of the substantive.
Thank you, Councillor. Follows Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Leader. First of all, I would like to thank Councillor Merriweather and the team for all of their hard work on this project so far, and for holding the councillor briefings before this meeting, and for the extremely comprehensive report we have before us. I have in the room here officers Abby and Candice, and also I think online we have Debbie as well, and they will be able to answer any technical questions that might arise during the evenings. During the evening. As with all councils, we have to generate additional income to help replace a loss amounting to approximately 15 billion in core government funding to local authorities by this government over the past decade. The decision to proceed with the retail element of this scheme will support Waverley achieving additional income in the long term. The alternative would be cutting service to our residents, which I think we would all find very unpalatable. With the fair funding review postponed yet again, this government's abject failure to reform the formulae that underpin its grant allocation means that councils continue to face an uncertain future. However, this is the environment that we are forced to operate within, and this council has been prudent in the investments it has made to date, working within a clearly defined investment strategy and risk appetite. Councillors by now will be very familiar with 69 High Street site that offers an opportunity for a regenerational project, along with the creation of jobs and a boost to the local economic activity, followed in a later phase by the affordable housing scheme, with the obvious benefits of being located in the centre of Godalming. Phase 1 of the project will deliver a commercial unit, and this could develop into an important anchor site for the high street. We are seeing restaurants and cinemas now replacing what were the more traditional high street anchors of department stores, and they are helping to increase footfall and grow the all-important nighttime economy. Whilst councillors may have a preference for the type of tenant they would like to see on the high street, I would stress that this tenant was attracted as part of an open market process, and this is a deliverable deal that is currently on the table. What is clear is that Waverley is experiencing a weakening economy, and between 2016 and 2021, we have seen a loss of approximately 3,000 jobs, with a year-on-year decline in the number of businesses being set up. 98% of our 8,000 businesses are micro, about 91% actually, and 7% rather small. Sadly, we are seeing more business deaths than births, with overall a 43% business survival rate in the borough. In the last decade, our local economy has only grown by 492 million, as opposed to Guildford at 1.2 billion and Mole Valley at 852 million. Whilst this council does a lot to support our small businesses, it is more important to do what we can to attract more businesses into the borough, and also a range of businesses onto our high streets alongside our more common micro businesses. This report is not concerned with the acquisition of 69 High Street. That is not under discussion this evening. The site was purchased early 2022 by the council as a general fund mixed use development with the benefit of planning permission, and fully supports the aspirations set out in our corporate strategy to optimise the availability of housing and to support our businesses. This report is seeking approval of the recommendations to allow the project to move forward to delivery, recognising that the council has been in dialogue with this prospective tenant, a national restaurant provider, for some period of time, and we consider that this would be an excellent new addition to the High Street. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hyman. Yeah.
I do apologise, Madam Chair. May I raise a point of order in respect of the exempt papers?
Your point of order is?
Compliance with section 100A and what's 100A4, which refers to 100I, which then refers to Schedule 12A, paragraph 9 and 10 of the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you very much.
As you asked. Thank you. Yes, it's very kind of you to ensure that the new borough solicitor, welcome to our new borough solicitor. I don't think we've been introduced. Yes,
one moment.
Thank you, Councillor. And I know you've raised this with me as well as Susan Sell. I think your question is, how did we get to the point where there were parts of this report which are classified as exempt?
Well, the issue, yes, as I've said, is that section 9 says that information is not exempt information. I'm quoting, information is not exempt information if it relates to proposed development for which a local planning authority may grant itself planning permission. And of course, this development is development, and it does not there put in any restrictions in respect of only applying to the where you're discussing the planning application itself or whatever. And section 10 then clarifies further by saying that information which is not prevented from being exempt in that manner is exempt if and so long as, in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. And that's the bit here that we have to consider if we're going to vote to go into exempt, or if we're going to vote to say that this is not exempt information from page 19 onwards.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. If you would be so kind.
Well, my question is what I put in, what I've asked previously.
Yes, we haven't
twice really. What is the reason for us, that outweighs the desire for exemption? What is the reason that outweighs that in terms of the public interest? Because I can't see anything there. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid I can't help you with why the decision was made. I can, for the benefit of members, I can offer an explanation and contextualise this for you. As you know, Councillor, the law relating to what information can be classified as exempt is contained in terms of a list within something called Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. This schedule sets out 7 categories of certain information which, provided its exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing it, can be classified as exempt and therefore taken out of the public domain. One of these categories is financial information. In this case, the information concerned relates to the financial aspects of a commercial real estate development project of this authorities. Now, officers having considered the public interest, which incidentally is not defined in law, formed the view that the need to keep this, what they judge to be commercially sensitive information, out of the public domain was in this case outweighed by the public interest in disclosing it.
May I ask what information that is that's commercially sensitive then? Because I think the deal's been done and we're, I don't think there's anything in there which I can see which I think would be sensitive.
I think we'll move on. Are there any other? Yes, members, if you want to move to exempt, we can do that. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would not like to move to exempt just yet, if I may be permitted to speak, and I do value the opportunity to speak in open session. I heard with interest Councillor Follow's words, and I heard with interest Councillor Merryweather's 1 hour session regarding 69 High Street. And I listened with interest to Councillor Townsend talking about wanting additional income and being prudent. Well, I believe that the proposal to spend nearly £2 million of council taxpayers' money is flawed, and I'll be voting against it. And I think it is important to take note of the decision to purchase 69 High Street, which was made over a year ago, because that's a context, and it's important that we put this into the context of that. We know from the UK Land Registry that Waverley paid £2,634,000, including VAT, for 69 High Street in May 2022, after a decision made by this council the previous February to that. The deal came with planning consent for some 8 dwellings above and behind, but crucially, no agreement had been struck to lease the retail unit. And without such an agreement in place, in my view, no deal should have been done, or the price paid should have been substantially lower. 15 months on, still no retail deal is in place. And by the way, the planning consent has in fact expired. On top of all that, we've had to pay holding costs like business rates and utility bills every month. Today's value of that property is clearly much lower than the price paid. The Conservative group believe that the property may be worth less than £1 million. If that is so, then the administration has already lost the council taxpayer some £1.5 million. And it's not good enough to blame market conditions. It's clear that the 2022 deal was a bad one. And maybe it will be helpful to have an external appraisal from an independent advisor so that the extent of the loss can be known and formally placed on the public record. Tonight, we are asked to approve a further expenditure of nearly £2 million. This increases our total investment, if that's the right word, to well over £4 million. Within that 2 million, 1.9 million is earmarked for the retail unit. And I have to say that until and unless a deal with a reasonable return on investment can be demonstrated, I will not support the proposed further expenditure of nearly £2 million. That's all I want to say in open session, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This proposal is within my ward of Godalming Central and Oxford, and I would also like to note that my husband, Councillor Tom Kill, is a Godalming Town Councillor for the same ward. I very much welcome the progress that this report shows in supporting the local economy of Godalming. The previous tenants of this building left in 2021, and alongside some other large retailers also closing their premises, this has left some quite vast gaps in our high street. This is certainly not an isolated issue, and it's one that many towns are suffering. Godalming has a retail vacancy rate of 8%, according to Waverley's most recent figures, 5% less than the UK high street average, yet there are a small number of the large retail units which could give the impression of a bigger problem. There is also a wider issue that some of the vacant shops are looking untidy and are in need of attention. Despite these challenges, I'm really pleased to see that a number of new businesses have recently opened in the town. In addition, with due credit to the hard work of the Town Council and voluntary and other groups, a number of successful events are run throughout the year, such as the recent Staycation Live, which attract people from far and wide. The turning on of the Christmas lights in November of last year saw a 152% increase in footfall from the previous Saturday. There is a huge amount of potential in our high streets, and so we must set the right conditions for it to succeed. It therefore seems sensible to me to separate the two elements of the project and to progress at pace with the commercial premises. With much to deliver, it will be important not to lose momentum on the housing side of the project, which supports our corporate priority of optimising housing that is sustainable, energy efficient, and at all income levels for local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keel. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Atkins.
I just want to check whether this is an exempt or not. Okay, so. Okay, I'll wait then.
Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for letting me come back. I think Councillor Keel has highlighted the great deal of potential Godalming has, and the way we can tap into this is clear. Today's value of the property is absolutely completely irrelevant because we're not intending to sell the asset. We'd be absolutely mad to do so. So there isn't a loss that will be realised either actually or on the books because we're not intending to sell the site. We would be insane to do so. Indeed, we would, if we were in the position where any of that was something that we were thinking about, we'd obviously just build houses on it ourselves. Now, I think one of the main reasons that we haven't just done that is A, because I think residents want to see the rejuvenation of our high streets and therefore have some level of commercial still on there. But also, if there are going to be some houses, that they're in sustainable locations, that they're sustainable properties, they're affordable for people who actually intend to live there, and that they're of good quality, which, to be honest, is not what you see from some of the equivalent conversions done by private developers in equivalent areas in other parts of the town. This particular building is not unique in the fact that there is a commercial at the front and some residential at the back proposed. There are other sites in Godalming that already do this, and they don't do it nearly as well as we're proposing to do because they're fixated on extracting as much financial value out of it as possible, rather than looking at the other types of value, which we are, I believe, on bound as councillors and as a council to actually take part. I reflect on Crest Nicholson's profit warning, Councillor Martin, which specifically highlighted Brightwells in its numbers. And there are a number of Conservatives of that era who I'm sure can elucidate us all on bad deals, but this is not one, not for Godalming and not for Waverley.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. We have Councillor Murray, Councillor Goodridge, and then Councillor Clark. So Councillor Murray, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So maybe people may not know, but I'm a commercial leaseholder of a coffee shop, a hospitality business in Farnham in Lyne and Lamb Yard. So when I looked at this and looked at it very carefully, and I'll be very careful what I say because I know we're not in exempt, is that the tenant has been given such advantageous terms, below commercial rent and big incentives to be the anchor tenant, and it seems a little bit like the tail is wagging the dog. I, as a tenant, don't have a lot of power with my landlord, I'm afraid. As long as I pay my rent on time, he leaves me alone. And that's the same with most commercial tenants. I know the council is a different thing, but there's a danger. The council's stated strategy is to regenerate the high street. This will regenerate one building in the high street, but it has a real danger because the new tenant has such a low cost base because of the advantageous terms which we have, the council are proposing. It may force other businesses, existing businesses, which are struggling. It may force those existing businesses out of business. And also it could, if anybody looks at this and people find out how advantageous it is, new entries coming into the Godalming High Street would also want that advantageous terms. So I'm not a crystal ball and I don't know, I'm just saying, have you thought of this? Have you put this into some sort of context? Because once there's state intervention into commercial businesses, it skews the market and there'll be winners and there'll be losers. Definitely the tenant will be a winner, but they could be losers. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What seems clear to me from this report that this council should not be entering into speculative commercial developments. We understandably don't have all the expertise in-house, and we therefore need to seek a lot of expert advice from third parties, which inevitably means that we're a bit like a tanker. It takes a long while to sort of make any progress. And this causes delay, as distinct from commercial outfits who do it all the time, who are able to move more quickly and more smartly. I mean, when this was completed, the purchase in May 2022, the council must have been aware of the financial problems in the UK due to COVID and the Ukrainian war, but despite that, carried on. The decision taken to buy this unit did not receive my support at the time, and it's been made clear that there are two strategic objectives for doing it. Firstly, to bring forward affordable housing. That's now being delayed long term and being kicked into the long grass, it would appear. For how long, I don't know. And secondly, to make a positive contribution to Godalming High Street. I think, and I agree with Councillor Murray, that the decision could have the opposite result for the reasons that he's set out. Let's face it, if you've got 3 shops doing the same thing, and one of them is supported by the council on a very good deal, it puts the other two businesses at a distinct disadvantage. The question I want to ask is, can I have an assurance that none of this money will be spent until we have a binding contract with this prospective tenant? Because the reason for this extraordinary meeting and to push it through before it goes to ONS, etc., is because of the urgency in doing a deal with this tenant. I would want that deal tied up before we go any further spending ratepayers' money. Thank you.
Councillor Goodrich, were you wanting to do an amendment to the original recommendation?
No, I was just asking a question.
Okay, thank you.
If I'm assured that that's what's going to happen, I'm very happy.
Thank you. Do you want to do it in your summing up? Or thank you. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, I accept that some members are opposed to high street intervention and that others support attempts at high street regeneration. The latter is an ideological stance that even I, as a non-political councillor, do support. No one else is going to help the high street, so surely we have some form of responsibility to do so, given that many of us stood in the local elections in May in support of our corporate strategy, which includes supporting a strong, resilient local economy and providing good quality, affordable housing. I suspect if this kind of opportunity arose in Farnham, or indeed in Cranley or Hazelmere, then their local members would jump to be behind it. Waverley Borough Council is uniquely placed as we don't have shareholders demanding profit and dividends. All 69 High Street has to do is pay for itself. But there is a caveat to this benevolence, and that is our limited capacity and property development skills, which can lead to an over-reliance upon consultants and the fees that always seem to come with them. So there is a balance to be struck here, and we must work with our officers, supporting them and ensuring that this project is delivered on time and on budget. And I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We have Councillor Hyman and then Councillor Williams. Yes, Councillor Hyman.
Thanks very much. Well, I was thinking that actually we should perhaps look at a amendment to cover what Councillor Goodrich has said. So would it be possible for Councillor Follows to just cover first of all whether or not we have that before I speak? Thanks.
If you're okay with me just to elaborate on that one outside of my summing up, my understanding would be, as with other contract sort of debates that we've had in the past, that were we not to enter the terms of which we are effectively outlining in the business plan, that effectively council wouldn't have authority to enter into it because it's been authorised to enter into the business plan that's outlined in the annexes in this paper. So in line with, say, for example, the Broadwater matter, where the other party did not meet the contractual requirements outlined in our decision of council, that matter lapsed and came back to full council. My understanding would be that if the tenant came back with terms different to that presented in the business plan, the matter would therefore no longer have authority of council and therefore return to council and not require an amendment. Apologies if that was overly complicated, but I would just check I'm not completely off piste there.
Yeah, I can confirm what the leader has said there, that authority is being given here in governance terms, in very specific terms as set out in the order paper and the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman.
Yes, well, thank you very much indeed. Well, when this came forward 18 months ago, I was the only person that voted against it. So it's understandable there's a few people who want us to perhaps discuss, not discuss this in open, but I think some members have been sailing fairly close to the wind. I would think that a couple of our officers are a little bit palpitating a little at how close some of our members are getting to mention numbers that at the moment are in pink, on pink paper, and are exempt because we have not yet made a decision as to whether this is exempt or not. As a council, we have to make a decision as to whether to go into exempt session, and what we are doing at the moment is speaking in advance of that decision as to whether to go into exempt. And of course, you know, the issue is that we have to decide whether or not where the public interest lies. That's our decision.
Point of clarification, Madam Mayor. If members wish to take this into exempt, somebody needs to motion for it to go to an exempt so it can be voted upon to do so. It doesn't just migrate across that status without somebody motioning to do it. Okay, just for clarity.
Thank you very much. I have already made that offer. Councillor Hyman, would you like to continue?
Okay, so from that I understand that there is the administration is not, or the leader is not suggesting that we go into exempt and that we try and cover everything in open. Yeah, because there are things that have been said which I'd like to say, but I'm afraid of doing it without going to a vote first of all.
Point of clarification, apologies, Madam Mayor. I've no other constitutional method of doing this. I am not seeking to avoid going into exempt. I'm seeking, and I believe with the consensus of most of the chamber, to cover as much in public as it is physically possible to do before going into exempt. Of course, we will have to come out of exempt to do the actual vote, but just so everybody is aware of certainly the tack I was taking tonight, it was to do as much in public as possible and take it to exempt if members felt necessary to do so after 2 internal briefings on the numbers.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, that's fine. In that case, I won't mention the exact figures, but I have some serious concerns about the housing revenue account liability that we are assuming for the future in the business plan that we're going that's being recommended for us. The amount of money that the housing revenue account part of the land assumed at the moment is larger than, or is being allocated an amount, a cost that is larger than that for the commercial element that the general fund will take, whilst the values are the opposite way around. It makes no sense. You know, we should be involving tenants in this if we are going to be spending this amount of money on producing houses. I think Councillor Atkins has spoken in the past on the amount of development, which, you know, the alternative to go out and buy off plan from developers and get ourselves more housing, but without the risk, without the costs, and without needing to invest in the expertise and all the infrastructure we need to be able to do the job properly as a council. I'm worried about the Woking mindset that, I just see everybody still stuck with that. And it really does concern me. The exit strategy that we've got, the original exit strategy, we're now being told, well, it wasn't real. We can't have that. We can't do it. And the new exit strategy, I don't really see as being any more real than the original. So happy that, well, unhappy, the official abolishment of the purpose of having pink papers. Pink papers is so that we know what we can speak about and what we can't. I cannot support this on the basis of what is being done, where all the risk is being dumped on the HRA. And I've spoken at some length at both the executive meeting in exempt and at the briefings. We've had one of the briefings where we've had an hour from the portfolio holder, and we've tried to put in 10 minutes of the other side of the story, but it hasn't gone down very well. But there's a lot of people here I know share the concerns that we do not have the skill set. We should not be doing this. Look what's happened already. Look what's happened elsewhere. I think that I would like us to go into exempt to be able to discuss this further. And in fact, I don't. I want us to decide that we can discuss it openly without going to exempt, but that requires a vote on going into exempt, doesn't it?
Councillor Follows, one moment, we're going to have a point of clarification. Thank you.
Just to clarify, Councillor Hyman, the decision has been made that annexures to this report have been classified already as exempt. If members want to discuss those, then they make an application to the chair and a vote will be taken as to whether or not we go from open session to closed exempt session, at which point the live stream will be cut. So hopefully that's clarified the position as regards the status of the report and its appendices.
Point of clarification, Madam Mayor. More of a rhetorical one, I suspect. Members don't have the ability or authority in chamber to review the status of the paper's classification or not, and certainly have no constitutional powers, including me, to alter that classification outside of the session or inside the session. They are classed as exempt, and to discuss them, we must go into exempt.
Point of order, can you please advise us whether that's true? Because the whole point of it going to a vote for us is because we do have the power. Otherwise, why would we have to vote on it?
Councillor Hyman, I'm going to move to the next two speakers, which Councillor Williams and Councillor Crowe. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our existing corporate strategy commits this council to building genuinely affordable housing, social housing, wherever this is possible, and reinvigorating and revitalizing our high streets across the borough. Now, the proposals that we are considering today are, as already stated, following through what we have already started, consistent with those objectives. And for me, and this particularly, I think, echoes or harks back to the point that was made by Councillor Murray. A little while back, I had a long conversation with one of the tenants, now sadly one of the former tenants, of a hugely successful service outlet in Godalming, squeezed out, by the pandemic, but squeezed out by ever increasing costs, ever increasing rents by an acquisitive landlord, motivated by profit and profit alone. We have the opportunity to be able to change this. I have talked not just during an election campaign recently, but constantly through my work as a councillor. I talk to residents of Godalming as a Waverley Borough Councillor and as a Godalming Town Councillor. And residents of this town where we are holding this meeting regularly complain, as Councillor Follows alluded to in his introduction, regularly complain about our high street dying, shops closing, local businesses being squeezed out by unaffordable rents and unsympathetic landlords. I would not want to be associated with a council that simply stands by and lets these things happen. I was elected as a councillor, as other members of this council were elected, to do my best to make a difference in my local community as much as I can, however limited the powers we might have, however constrained we might be by, in the face of ongoing cuts in central government funding to local government. So, in my view, I would be negligent in my duties to my local community if I didn't support this proposal. And equally, I would be negligent in my duties to the residents of Waverley if there was a comparable proposal in relation to one of the other key centres of population, key towns in our borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Mayor. I support these recommendations 100%. Everybody I spoke to when I was canvassing, they basically had two questions. What's happening with housing and what is happening with our town high street? It's something that people still keep asking me. And as far as I can tell, these recommendations address both those issues. They provide housing and they also provide much needed rejuvenation of Godalming High Street. And I just remind us all of the number of people that we were informed tonight are on the waiting list. 1,180, I think, was mentioned. I was also elected to do my best for the community, as Councillor Williams has said. And I think that these proposals absolutely underpin that.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Now, Councillor Martin, you have spoken already. Do you have a point of order to raise?
No, Madam Mayor, I was going to sort of suggest that perhaps we should be going into exempt session. I'd be happy to second Councillor Hyman's motion if that's what he proposed originally. Much as I hate going into exempt session, but I think it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Before we do that, we do have two other speakers. I'm going to take.
Apologies, I didn't realise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, in my role this year as Mayor of Godalming and Godalming Town Councillor, the hub of the town is central really to its community spirit, and a lot of what Godalming Town Council has done in terms of events held in the food markets that are available, the Pride in Surrey that came along has capitalised on the high street as an area of commerce. And I think we should be, as Councillor Williams has alluded to and others, sorry, my voice has gone today, we should lead by example. And we should be promoting a system which actually is benevolent, does look after its tenants, does think about long-term investment with a financial angle, of course, but in other investments as well. Support for future economic opportunities, support for sustainable opportunities. Like other councillors, it's one of the key issues that residents speak to me about, and even though we are lower as a percentage, which is excellent in the current climate, there are still larger stores, as Councillor Keel mentioned, that are left vacant, which leaves a very different sense. So I will also be voting for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to come back on some of the questions that had been raised previously. I know that Councillor Martin was wondering why we hadn't sort of got the tenant to sign on the dotted line. And I would just like to say, you know, we weren't in a position until we had agreement from the council here to get anyone to sign anything. That is part of the process, and we are very much hoping to have an agreement to lease before the end of this year. This isn't unique. This is the process of the council. This isn't a 3-day deal kind of approach. Councillor Murray mentioned about commercial rents, and I very much appreciate and value his comments as well. This tenant, when we purchased the property, was interested in renting the property. It had gone out to open market, and obviously when we bought the property, the negotiations continued. Obviously, it is difficult to know what people are paying individually as commercial rents, but what is clear from my meetings with commercial agents is that rents are under a huge amount of pressure and are reducing. So, you know, there are opportunities to renegotiate rents with any individual tenant, and that may be something that, you know, other occupants of the high street are able to do going forward. I know that Councillor Goodrich spoke about this being speculative development. I'm afraid I do not agree whatsoever that this is speculative development. This is regeneration opportunity. You know, whilst, you know, he mentioned about pressure because of due to the Ukraine war and the COVID, however, he very much missed out the Kwarteng and Liz Truss mini budget, which has crippled this country for a while and contributed towards spiralling interest rates. And with regard to ONS, there's nothing to stop ONS looking at the purchase of this particular property. And I think that would be a very good opportunity for them to do that. Councillor Hyman spoke about the HRA liability. I know that Candice would be very happy to answer any queries on that and to allay his fears on any of that. This, you know, as to going out and shopping for houses here, there and everywhere, you know, that misses the point, Councillor Hyman, of this project, which is a regeneration project, which is to regenerate the high street and also to provide also affordable housing in the centre of Godalming as well. And as to our officers' skill set, our officers are very experienced in putting together projects like this, and we do rely on external help, as a lot of developers do. That is what they do. They get external consultants carrying out flood risk assessments, carrying out all sorts of biodiversity checklists and studies as well. We have to go out to the experts, and we have to take advice from those experts as well. I welcome Councillor Williams and also Councillor Crow's comments about support for this project. I think it is really important that as a council we are seen to be supporting our high streets. They are going through a time of great transition, you know, and some traditional stores have not managed to last, but we are hoping that with the efforts and interventions that we are able to make, and some other councils as well, that we are able to make, that this will result in a vibrant, buoyant high street that will encourage other people to visit. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. So, Councillor Hyman, I believe that you are proposing that we move to exempt session. Is that correct?
Not quite. I am proposing that in accordance with item 4 on the agenda, which is on page 2, that the mayor moves, because it is for you to move, not for me, for you to move that we go into exempt, so that we can have the discussion as to whether this information should be exempt or not, because I would like all of the information,
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
perhaps the name of the, except perhaps the name of the firm who is the intended lessee at this stage. I think we could leave that for another day to disclose if necessary. But I do not see anything which is in the public interest for us to withhold and have to be careful about. I think we should discuss this all in open, and the only way that we can do that and assert our rights as members to do so is through the process here under paragraph 4, where you move that we go into exempt and we decide that we don't want to, we want to discuss all of it in open session. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Slightly unusual point of order because I'm essentially suggesting that Councillor Hyman is proposing something ultra vires. So there's no constitutional clause or law for me to point to because what he's proposing is not lawful. We aren't able to revert, we aren't able to judge and remove an exempt status from papers that are currently exempt. We can only motion to go into exempt or not. And just to comment on the second point you made under item 4. Item 4 is a default for the mayor to take us to check at the end of the meeting if there is a need to go into exempt. Members need to positively motion to go into exempt in this session. The mayor can do it too, of course, as a member of this council, but it is for somebody else to propose. Now, as I've mentioned, I would like to keep this in as open as possible, but obviously if you want to go into exempt to discuss the exempt papers, somebody will need to motion to do so.
I'm sorry, how many times do we have to say this?
Councillor Hyman, may I call you to speak, please, rather than you butt in? And would you be so kind as to clarify whether you want to propose that we go into exempt session, please?
No, as I've said, I want you to propose that we
Thank you,
go into
Councillor
exempt
Hyman.
session.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Thank you, Councillor Hyman.
Look, I am the person who's been writing
Thank
about
you,
these things
Councillor
over all
Hyman.
these years, and I've got a lot of people here
Thank
who are
you.
laughing and who seriously have absolutely no respect for the way we should
No,
be
we
doing
have
business in
respect.
this chamber.
Councillor Hyman, we have respect, but we do things properly. Thank you. So I think we have no more speakers. Councillor Martin.
If we have no more speakers in open session, and I hate going into exempt session because I would much prefer to stay open, but if there are no members, and there are parts of this which are exempt, which many of us want to comment upon, I believe that we need to go into exempt, and I formally propose that we go into exempt. Happy to second.
Thank you very much. So that has been duly proposed and duly seconded. So, councillors, I refer you to the recommendations set out on the agenda to exclude the press and the public for the reasons set out in our exempt papers. Is that agreed? We're going to vote electronically.
Point of order, can we please ask for clarification as to whether we are allowed to determine now that we vote against going into exempts because we want to discuss the exempt papers in open because we do not consider them to be exempt. And I believe there are other members who support me on this matter. I do not think we should be. Why the secrecy? Can someone justify the secrecy on this, please? Unless it's just a matter of embarrassment.
Point of clarification, Madam Mayor, the monitoring officer has given that fully at least twice during this session, not specifically as to why these papers are in exempt, but also as to our powers regarding the status of exempt and what motioning to go into exempt does. And if the monitoring officer and the mayor weren't clear, the Constitution is exceptionally clear on the matter, as is the Local Government Act, section 12, as you have yourself highlighted. What we do here is
Would you
clearly...
let the borough solicitor please answer then, rather than answer for him? Do we have the right to vote no and continue?
Councillor Hyman, we talk through the chair. Thank you. So, are we able to vote electronically? Yes. So we have a proposal that is duly seconded. I read out the words on in your agenda. So members, would you please vote whether you want to exclude the press and the public, and please vote now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The outcome is 17 votes for, 4 votes in abstention and 16 votes against. Thank you. So that's 18 votes in favour. Thank you.
In favour of exempt?
Yes.
May I just check
Yeah.
that?